Hi everyone, my name is Herkeph and welcome back to our incredibly stupid hardcore world where I'm only allowed to use wooden tools and leather armor. In our last few episodes, we've managed to accumulate a few advancements as we successfully kidnapped one of each wolf variant, and we did this to have them spend the rest of their lives serving as a decoration for my base, as I thought it would be nice to have some company for our future oppression and genocide-focused escapades. But by doing this, we managed to snag the whole pack advancement. We then went on and risked our life to get enough netherite to get both the cover me in debris and serious dedication advancements. And today, we'll be continuing our incredibly important and productive hunt for advancements, as I am still waiting for my prescription medication to kick in, which is very much needed in order to resume progress on our mega base expansion. The first advancement we'll be hunting for today is the complete catalog advancement, meaning that we'll be tracking down one of each cat variant to then take them from their home by force to relocate them and have them meet the same fate as our wolves. However, in order to earn the trust of our unsuspecting feline kidnapping victims, we needed candy to lure them into our white van. But since this is a family-friendly channel that is suitable for all ages, we'll be replacing the candy with fish and the white van with a boat. And now you might be thinking to yourselves, that's perfect, as you have a guardian farm that must have produced enough fish to last you forever, which is something you're absolutely correct in. However, as some of you might remember, we rebuilt the storage system for it to accommodate our auto-crafters, and in that redesign, we had all of the fish go into a disposal system, meaning that we would have to collect the fish by hand, as I had, once again, added to our ever-growing list of decisions that come back to haunt me. But as I was collecting fish from a nearby river like some sort of impoverished person, I remembered that I have the patience comparable to that of a middle-aged mom ordering McDonald's for their autistic toddler, so I decided to go to the storage of our guardian farm in desperate hope that we would have some sort of malfunction in the system, causing fish to have ended up in our backlog chests. And when I arrived, I was very pleasantly surprised to find exactly that, meaning that my utter incompetence and general failure in life had finally paid off. This meant that we could now proceed with our series of kidnappings, so I made my way back to our base and flew off to a nearby desert village. My strategy to tackle this very morally questionable task was rather simple, as I intended to go from village to village and tame all I could see that we didn't already have, and rather luckily, I managed to tame 4 different cat variants in our first village, which was significantly more than I'd expected. The 4th cat of the village was playing a bit hard to get, but I eventually managed to dig him into a hole so that he couldn't escape as I violently force-fed him with fish that is most likely old enough to cause major health complications. But after that rather invigorating success, I deployed the exact same strategy as we used for the wolves, which was to attach a boat to a lead and fly back to base. And once the cats had been successfully brought back to base in a rather impelling, dramatic and borderline erotic manner, I decided to fly back to the exact same village as my greed knows no bounds. However, my hope of finding any additional cats in that village was crushed in the exact same manner as my hope for my future. But it didn't stop there, as I didn't find a single cat in the 2nd or 3rd village, which was rather inconvenient, though our luck turned as we entered our 4th village, where we managed to get 2 additional cats for our collection of victims of what some would call animal abuse. And to tame them, I used the tactic that we discovered earlier, where I shoved the cats into a hole to force feed them whilst they're defenseless. This meant that we were over halfway of getting the advancement, which was rather surprising, as we were only about 30 minutes into this mission. I then went on to rinse and repeat this process. And after a bit under 1.5 hours, I had finally managed to tame all cat variants, except for one, which was the black cat. As some of you might be aware, black cats are a bit more soul-crushing to acquire as they only spawn in villages on a full moon or in witch huts. So I then went on to spend an additional 1.5 hours trying to find a witch hut or a village that had a black cat, which was just as fun as you may imagine. But after that said hour and a half, we had finally located a witch hut, where we acquired our last cat as well as the precious advancement. And with that, we had successfully used over 3 hours of my time to acquire all virtual cat breeds, which was probably one of my most impressive accomplishments of my life, which now that I think about it, is rather concerning. But even with that impressive feat, we're still quite a bit away from getting all advancements. So I decided to attempt to get as many done as possible and started checking off some of the easier ones, including using a lodestone and charging up a respawn anchor. Though I was rather quickly faced with a more difficult task where I had to get all potions effects at the same time. So I gathered up all of the potions I had readily available and partook in the act commonly associated with Southern Americans that are missing a significant number of teeth. That, of course, being illegal homebrewing. But as I had finished brewing all of the potions we needed, apart from one, I realized that we needed a cobweb for it, which is impossible for us to obtain as it required a pair of shears. Defeated, I put all of the potions in a shulker box and framed it, which we would count as its completion. I then moved on to our next advancements, which were both related to striders, where we needed to ride one using a fungus on a stick and also do it in the overworld. So I kidnapped one and made my way back to our base. From there, I set up a path of lava, which our strider would later come to run across for our advancement. And once we had successfully acquired both advancements, I moved on to the Uneasy Alliance advancement, which required us to bring a ghast from the Nether into the overworld and then kill it. But rather luckily, some person on YouTube who has a significantly higher IQ than me had a really simple way of doing this, where I'd simply had to AFK, which is something I very much prefer over putting in effort. With that, we had successfully managed to complete all of the Nether advancements. Next up, I decided to start working on the adventure section, which were mostly fairly easy on my mental health. But after a bit of advancement hunting, my prescription medication had started working its magic, meaning that we could get back to the expansion of our mega base. As I briefly mentioned in our last video, my plan for the circular platforms is to build completely custom villages for biomes that currently don't have villages. And I decided to get that started with the mangrove swamp. As some of you may be aware, the regular swamps have a chance of generating a witch hut, but they're rather underwhelming. So I made the executive decision to make a witch-inspired village with completely custom houses and other random stuff that I came up with throughout this project. And after I had designed a few different houses of different sizes and picked out a few block palettes, I got to work building them in our hardcore world. My plan was to have 4 different palettes that would transition into each other. The first one would be red, which would transition into magenta, which would then transition into purple and finally into blue. My reasoning behind this decision is something I am too demented to remember, but I'm sure it was really logical and highly intelligent. And the designs of the houses themselves were inspired by the starter base of a YouTuber called Shubble from their 2nd season of Empires. But anyways, here's a time lapse. And after spending enough time to turn into fossil fuel and enough antidepressants to enter the 4th dimension, we had finally built all of the houses. However, at this point, the village didn't look particularly spooky, as it was basically just a bunch of houses with weird squiggly shaped roofs. I had absolutely no idea how to make it more spooky, so I procrastinated my intense brainstorming session by designing a bridge. And once I had finished designing the bridge, I had actually come up with 2 ideas that I could add to the village, as it's really close to Halloween. My idea was to build a cemetery, as well as a giant carved pumpkin. I know, what an innovative and original concept, isn't it? so I jumped back into my creative building world and started off by designing a carved pumpkin, which required a bit of testing around, as I am an absolute Neanderthal of a builder, but eventually I managed to end up with a semi-decent pumpkin, which was very epic. And after having gathered some of the resources required for our pumpkin, I jumped back into our creative building world and designed a cemetery, which, just like our pumpkin, took a bit of trial and error for the exact same reason. But once that had been dealt with, I got to building them in our hardcore world. But as I was about to build the cemetery, I realized that I needed to demolish a couple of the houses we've built earlier, which highlighted my severely lackluster level of planning skills. Though putting my inadequate level of general skills needed to be classified as an adult aside. Here's another time lapse. At this point, the village was definitely looking significantly spookier than before, which was very epic, and whilst I was building the pumpkin as well as the other stuff, I also decided to partake in some copyright infringement to build a smaller pumpkin, as I don't respect the concept of intellectual property. But the bridge as well as the cemetery looked a bit odd, as they were the only things that were made out of stone, so I decided to make the paths, as they would be made of stone as well, in hopes of it making those things a bit less out of place. Which it rather luckily did, which made my life ever so slightly more worth living. However, as I said in our last episode, the goal of this build is to build a village based on the mangrove swamp, and we still didn't have any mangrove trees, so I planted a bunch of saplings, though I rather quickly noticed that they weren't growing. I then promptly utilized my absolutely unparalleled level of hackerman skills to carry out a Google search, which informed me that mangrove trees need solid blocks underneath them in order to grow, so I grabbed a bunch of cobblestone and placed them under the mud where the saplings were planted, which solved all of my problems. It was then just a matter of adding a few details, including placing lily pads, the designing and construction of a fountain, lampposts, as well as some lighting to make sure no mobs can spawn. And with that, we were finished building the village. But that is about all the time we have for this episode, so there we have it, the 21st episode of our incredibly stupid hardcore world. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.